Hello all, welcome to a new video. In this video, we will try to understand how we can define Spark configurations, and we will also see what is the order in which those configurations are applied. This is very crucial to know because this helps us in ensuring that whatever we are uh, supplying as a configuration is the one that is getting launched in the cluster as well. Uh, Before we do, configuration is things we set up as a as an to make the environment behave as what we expect it to be, and the configurations can be, for example, number of executors is one configuration, how many cores for each executor, how many cores for the driver memory, executor memory. Then we have, let's say, if we want anything, let's say any class that we want to add, Java options that we want to add, let's say logging we want to enable, that can be done using Java options. Let's say we want to load certain classes in the executor or in the or certain classes that needs to be loaded before the application kicks in. So that how we can add those things in the class path. So those are the different configurations that are present. So they can be cut. The configuration can be categorized whether it is an application properties, whether it's a runtime environment or application behavior properties that we are trying to do, or it is a SQL streaming, Spark SQL. Is it related to memory management or Spark UI? It is related to networking or security. So there are different configurations options which are there in Spark. There's one few examples of each of the unit. For example, when we say application properties, so application property can be the Spark name, and it can be in or the other can be what master we are using. For example, master in a sense, whether it is yarn, it is running on yarn, it is running on Kubernetes, and we can pass any other things as well. Like say if we want to pass, we can say spark dot some other config dot name, and that will be available in the Spark applications. The reason why it is very interesting, or that is we have to know, is let's say you are running your job from an Airflow, and let's say in the DAG is Airflow DAG is there, which talks to different systems, and there is one task which does some processing with Spark on a remote cluster. How do you track the lineage that okay, this particular Spark application is launched from where, or let's say some information is needed inside that particular application, that let's say based on the DAG run or based on the last processing, or let's say some task of the previous Airflow job needs to be some information needs to be passed to this application. So that all those things can be done if we pass that as an properties from from a custom property. Like we can say spark dot airflow dot that name, spark dot airflow dot any other things, and that will be available in the Spark application. Application can read that and based on that take a conditional decision. So that's this is why this is very important. Uh, Certain things are reserved. We can't say, for example, Spark Master is reserved. You can't give Spark Master something which does not, which is not understood by the application. Or for example, let's say any properties that you want to do in the driver, that should be a well-defined property in the system. And other ones, like for example, I gave a Spark dot Airflow dot something that is not reserved. You can create on your own. So that is one application properties. Then runtime properties, as I mentioned, Spark dot driver. uh, this means spark.driver dot extra Java option or spark.executor dot Java options. Both are available for driver and executor. So this basically says what Java options we are providing, because as I mean, as we know, the Spark runs in a JVM. So if we want to, let's say that okay, we want to use instead of G1GC garbage collector, we want to use JGC, generational garbage collector, which is a new, faster GC in Java 17. So we can pass that information using extra Java options. Let's say we want to load certain classes in sub. Let's say if we are running Spark on an yarn cluster, and let's say we have to pass certain new version of Hive. and we want to load certain class paths in the JVM, we can pass that in extra class paths that okay, where from where that class should be loaded. So that is another thing that is runtime properties. Memory configurations, as I mentioned, Spark memory, driver memory, or executor memory can be set. Execution environment, for example, for each of those executor, how many cores we want to run, that also we can supply. SQL related, for example, although it says SQL related, but it applies to Python APIs, non-Python APIs. When I say SQL, it is the SQL engine, which on top of which data frame stack is built. So these things gets applied there. For example, shuffle partitions, how many shuffle partitions will get created when we do a group by operation. So by default it is 200, but let's say we know that okay, our table is big enough and it will have more than 200 unique keys when we do a join. So when it does, we if we let's say our group by condition is on a certain column and that column has more than 200 keys, so it makes sense for us to increase the shuffle partition to that number so that Spark is able to process all those things in parallel in lesser time. So that is one example where we can set this. Then we have broadcast timeout, like how long before it broadcast operation gets timed out. What is the threshold limit for the broadcast join? For example, by default it is 10 MB, but if we know that our cluster is big enough, our driver memory is let's say of 30 GB, and we can tolerate, let's say, 1 GB of table to be broadcasted. So we can increase this in auto broadcast threshold so that any table which is lower than that will get automatically broadcasted. Then for Spark streaming, we have a streaming namespace. So basically, if you see, there are different namespaces for here. So Spark.app is one namespace, Spark.driver is another namespace, Spark.sql. Similarly, Spark.streaming is a namespace in which we have settings for Kafka, settings for backtracer, stuff like that. And then this is for UI. So whether if we want to have an UI enabled, so whenever we launch a job, there is a live web UI that gets spinned up on 4040 port, which is basically a Java servlet running on the driver itself. So we can see what is going on in the live, and there is also an history UI. So that again is something which can be configured. So we can say spark.history.retain logs, spark.event log directory, and stuff like that. So those are related to Spark UI. So the history UI is different and live UI is different. Both have different settings. And history UI is actually based on the event log. So there is an application which parses this event log and then displays it in UI that what is the current state or what is the job doing. So these are different configurations which we have. This is not limited to this. There are many others. So I'm not listing down all, but I just wanted to give you an idea. There are which all are there and what are interesting things to know. Now comes to the part that where can we set these things? So Spark offers us three places where we can set these configurations. One is the Spark defaults conf file, which is present in the Spark home directory. And this home directory is where the Spark, for example, when you install a Spark client in your local machine, this so wherever when you install, there will be a conf. The location where that binary gets installed, there inside that there will be a conf location. Inside that there is a spark default.conf file, which if we write in anything in that. So as the name suggests, these are the defaults. If Spark is not able to find, or let's say something is not defined in your Spark submit command, it will take this default one. Then other part is when we are running the Spark submit command, there also we can pass it as an hyphen flag. For example, we can say hyphen number executors. And if let's say here we have said Spark executor memory is let's say XYZ, let's say 10 GB, but we know that most of the jobs in the cluster requires 10 GB executors. But in our case, we are running an application which requires more, and then we can override this. So instead of using the default one, we can pass in here executor memory as a flag, and then gets passed. There is another way as well when we create the Spark session. So when we let's say we have a Python application which we are running. So while we create, we say Spark dot builder get or create method is there. So we create a Spark session in there. And while creating the session itself, we can provide some configs, which says that, okay, okay, I will give you an example of this. Like we are creating a config inside the application, and we are setting, let's say, driver memory and other stuff. Here is one other example where we are setting the executor memory to be 2 gigs in the driver application itself. So this is a one way of setting. And here this is executor memory. Again, if you see here, whatever app name we have given, say, this is same as similar to what the properties spark.app name means, and this name is also something similar. Now which one it will take, this one or whatever is present in the default one, or whatever is provided in the CLI. That's where we will see the order. So but before that, there is a slight disclaimer that if we are running on Yarn or even on Kubernetes, so we have two more places where we have option of setting that some configuration. One is spark env.sh file. This sets the environment variable for Spark uses, can be a driver and executor both. And see, as it says, is in Yarn it will not get reflected, but in case of Kubernetes it will. And application master process in cluster mode, if it is in the cluster mode, it will not get reflected. And there is a dot properties file, matrix or properties or log properties, which is used for logging in. So it's it's not limited to these three options. We have properties file as well as spark env.sh that can be used to set certain environment configurations. Now let's talk the relative precedence of in which this can be or which one gets applied at runtime. So uh, for example, one parameter which is Spark event log, which is for the history servers to come up. See, if Spark event log enabled is true, this is in the Spark defaults conf. It says that if you don't pass anything, it will enable. So the same thing can be done hyphen conf when we are doing a Spark submit. There also we can pass, and in Spark session also we can enable. Which is this. So there are three different ways of defining the same parameter. Which one will it take? Let's say in Spark default also it is there. Spark submit also it has, and Spark session also it has. Now the Spark defaults one gets overridden by whatever is you are passing in the terminal, and whatever you have passed in the terminal gets overridden by whatever you have written in the Spark application Spark session. So this is the order, but there is a catch. Catch is uh, catch here is basically this Spark session comes up in the driver. So let's say if you are let's say one example we take here. Let's say here. So what we are saying is in Spark submit we had that, okay, we had given Spark driver memory is 40 gigs, deploy mode is client, and master is Yarn. So now the challenge is, and this driver memory set to 20 gigs in the application code, as like this. Someone had set in the value to be driver memory to be 20 gigs. The reason, what do you think it will happen, that which one, 40 gigs or it will launch with 20 gigs? The reason it will launch with 40 gigs is in client mode, the driver launches on the Spark client machine, right? And this code runs on that cluster. Means not a cluster, this code runs inside the driver. So while the client launch, first thing will the deploy mode is client, the driver will come up in the client process, not on the cluster. And this configuration gets applied after the driver has launched, right? Because this driver is the one which is parsing this log. So after the driver has launched, it can't do a dynamic change of this. So that's where there are few things we have to understand at the time. What is the time in which that is launched? For example, if we are setting something for the driver which has already launched, that will not take an effect. Something similar happens, let's say we are trying to give a app name which has already been set. After that, if I change the app name, it will not work. It's at the time of defining the app name, it's set. It's set. So it is, we should pay attention to know which time the certain configurations are applied. So here we are setting these things. For example, there are few ways to get and see what is there. So if in our application, if we want to know what is the current configuration for certain things, we can say spark convert get, and then we will get that value. And if we want to update it, we can say configuration.update, and then we can also check whether we can modify or not. So this is very important, that we should be checking that whether this conf is modifiable or not. If it is not modifiable, we can't set it. Means modifiable in a sense is when you are querying it, at that time it is modifiable or not. It might be modifiable at the beginning when you are doing a Spark submit, but once the application has been launched, can be override or running applications configuration. So that can be checked. And if it is overrideable, you can override. For example, that shuffle partition, spark.sql.shuffle partition, this is overridable. This is the reason it is overridable is because this depends on stage to stage, right? You might need larger shuffle partitions when you are doing a group by, but later on we don't need those many shuffle partitions, because you might have done a repartition or coalesce, or AQE might have reduced the number of partitions that are there. So you don't need, you will be wasting by creating too many extra partitions. It will just create empty partitions or partitions with very lower number of values. So in those cases, we can override it. And it's a good practice as well, that you can do this thing, is that based upon the requirement, you keep on shuffling the number of partitions that you need in your environment. So that is there. So yeah, this is it for this blog. This blog is live on Medium. You can go and read as well if you want it to refresh. So yeah, so next time someone asks how configuration is defined in Spark and all the places where it can be defined and what is the order, this video should be good enough as a refresher. Thank you.